The Estanian army has 2 mythical knights on their side. My golem almost died fighting against them. If they hadn't run out of artillery ammunition, things could have ended badly for my troops. Leroy explained. Lemuel raised an eyebrow and sent him a mysterious smile. I heard that you had a discussion with their 2 venerables. Can you tell us what you have discussed with them? Leroy narrowed his eyes upon hearing this. This bastard. How did he get that information? Is there a spy on my side? No. I only negotiated a truce with them. It was necessary to give our troops ample time to rest. He calmly replied. Lemuel rubbed his chin thoughtfully, his expression unreadable. While he was silent, Leroy persuaded the others. Everyone, I understand your concerns, but this war will not be as easy as you think. They might send their mythical knights to 2 separate locations. If they breached, he had already prepared his script for this meeting. He needed more than a convincing argument to convince a group of arrogant nobles. We can just pretend to surrender. While saying this, he let out a faint smile. Pretend to surrender? The nobles were taken aback, and some also began to seriously consider his suggestion. Even Lemuel fell into deep thought. Leroy nodded his head. Think about it. If we choose to fight them, we would only suffer heavy casualties. By pretending to surrender, we wouldn't have to fight them. We can even buy enough time until reinforcements arrive. There was a heated discussion between the nobles as soon as he gave this suggestion. Some stuck to their previous decision and refused to surrender, but there were already a few who had changed their minds. Something doesn't feel right. Lemuel looked suspiciously at Leroy. This guy is the type of man who would never yield. He wouldn't even give face to the imperial family. Something is going on here. As if sensing his gaze, Leroy sent him a deep look. Lemuel let out a smile before looking away. Did he sense something? Leroy frowned. It would be bad if Lemuel were to discover the truth. The discussion continued for the next hour. Lemuel tried to convince the others not to support Leroy's suggestion, but the majority decided to trust Leroy. Damn it! These idiots! Can they not sense that there is something odd about the whole situation? Lemuel cursed in his mind. I need to get out of here and report everything to the imperial family. After the meeting concluded, Lemuel excused himself and left with haste. He brought a few of his closest aides, and they all headed to a secret entrance that led directly outside the city. My lord, shouldn't we report this to the venerable? One of his subordinates said. Lemuel sent him a glare and replied in a cold voice. No, we must leave at once. I have a feeling that Leroy has already betrayed us. Hearing this, everyone was stunned. How is that possible? No way. Why would the venerable do that? They couldn't believe it. Lemuel sneered. Leroy is already on the bad side of Haroun's imperial family. He also has numerous enemies among the nobility. If it weren't for his overwhelming martial power, his household would have already been destroyed by those people. If I'm not wrong, Estania must have already promised to accept him in their nation. Truthfully, he was still not 100% sure about this, but he couldn't shake off the feeling that Leroy had already betrayed them. Enough talking and just follow me. Lemuel led his subordinates to this secret passageway, which was an underground tunnel that led to a hill over a mile away from the city. Only a few people knew this secret passageway. Even Leroy didn't know about this. Due to the rough path of the tunnel, it took them almost 2 hours to reach the exit. Looking at the bright sky outside, Lemuel smiled. There are horses outside. We will move separately to dash. While he was talking, he noticed that his subordinates had gone unusually quiet. Furrowing his eyebrows, he turned around and saw something that made him terrified. The subordinates he brought were now lying on the ground with deep slits in their throats, and the culprit was just about 2 meters from him, staring at him with a mocking smile. Lemuel, I didn't plan on killing you so soon, but you just dug your own grave. The venerable, there must be a misunderstanding. Lemuel broke into a cold sweat and he hurriedly tried to explain himself. A misunderstanding? Do you think I don't know what you're planning to do? Leroy sneered. No, I just wanted to dash. Lemuel was about to say something, But his words were cut off when Leroy suddenly grabbed him by the neck. Cock. Eh. Lemuel was a transcendent knight, but he couldn't even break free from his grip. He tried to stimulate his energy core, but it was useless. He couldn't overpower Leroy. With a frosty expression, Leroy added more strength to his grip. In the next moment, the sound of bones cracking echoed in the tunnel. Thud. Oh, you're still alive. With a disdainful smile, Leroy looked down at Lemuel, who was crawling towards the exit. He had already broken the old man's neck, but the strong vitality of a transcendent knight kept him alive. You would have lived a bit longer if you had stayed in the city. Leroy clicked his tongue. With a swipe of his hand, he cut off the old man's head. KHSSHK. After killing him, Leroy didn't even bother to look at the corpse. He just spat a mouthful of saliva and left. In your next life, you should treat people's lives better. Lemuel's sudden disappearance made many people suspicious. They felt that Leroy had a hand in the matter, but no one dared to voice their suspicions. With Lemuel's death, the nobles of Helona were forced to follow the Venerable's orders. That was how Helona stopped their resistance and surrendered to the Estanian army. On the same day that Helona surrendered, Alaric received a report about the situation through a letter. How strange. My mission says that I only need to occupy 3 cities, but I still haven't received any notification. They had already conquered Atarkin, Midgard, and Helona, but the system still hadn't confirmed the completion of his mission. Did I miss something? He frowned. Just what is it that I have missed? Hey! Hey, you dumbass! A furious voice suddenly interrupted his thoughts. Turning his head, he saw Giovanni glaring at him with an annoyed expression. What is it? Stop bothering me. Alaric scowled and made a shooing gesture. Veins protruded on Giovanni's face when he heard this. Look at this bastard. He was about to lash out, but he noticed that Alaric was unusually quiet. What happened? You've been like this since you got that letter from Exler. He was curious to know what was bothering Alaric. Alaric sent him a weird look. Are you, perhaps, worried about me? Stop acting tough. Giovanni sneered. I know something is bothering you. Just spit it out. It's so boring here. Listening to your worries might help alleviate my boredom. Alaric face-bombed and shook his head. This guy is really treating me as some form of entertainment. With a serious face, he opened his mouth. Giovanni, I think something big will happen soon. Hearing this, Giovanni raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Do you remember how many enemy venerables had been stationed here? Alaric asked. Giovanni thought for a moment and replied. I heard that there were 3 of them. If we include the catastrophe-grade beast, that's 4. Why do you ask? Alaric took a deep breath and crossed his arms. After capturing 3 cities, we only encountered 2 enemy venerables and 1 catastrophe-grade beast. There is still 1 more we hadn't met. Giovanni furrowed his eyebrows. Are you saying that this remaining venerable might be waiting for an opportunity to attack us? Alaric shook his head with uncertainty. I don't know, but we should be careful. I will also send word to the guys on Mount Tyrad, Atarkin, and Helona. He had a feeling that his mission would only be completed if this remaining enemy venerable was defeated. The only problem was that they had no clue where this person was hiding. Even the Crown Prince still hadn't updated them about the person's whereabouts. I will inform everyone to be careful. Giovanni trusted Alaric's instincts. This guy was usually spot on about things like this. All right, I will leave this task to you. I'll go back first and write a letter to the others. Alaric stood up, waved his hand, and left with haste. Marlin provided Alaric with a small mansion as his accommodation. It was owned by an aristocrat who had been killed in the recent battle. To prevent retaliation from the members of the mansion, Marlin changed all the servants. At this moment, Alaric was in the master's bedroom, writing a letter, when a series of knocks interrupted him. Knock! 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 He stopped and turned his head. Come in. It's unlocked. Creak. A grim-faced Giovanni stepped inside the room. His face was covered in thick beads of sweat, and it looked like he ran all the way here. Alaric, Atarkin has fallen. Our warriors. All of them have perished. The guy spoke with a mixture of anger and sadness. Alaric seemed to have been electrocuted when he heard this. What? His expression changed dramatically as he rose to his feet. I received a letter from a survivor who managed to escape from there. He said that an army consisting of 500,000 soldiers attacked them. Giovanni added with a gloomy look. 500,000? When did they gather that many troops? Alaric's face fell. Now, he finally understood why the system didn't send any notification. It turned out that Atarkin had been recaptured by the enemies. Atarkin has been recaptured. This means that Mount Tyrad might have fallen first. That seems to be the case. Giovanni nodded. Alaric fell on his seat, his eyes shaking with fury. Our troops. Giovanni grabbed a stool and placed it next to his seat. What should we do? We can't just divide our forces now. If they divided their troops, the enemies might use the chance to attack the cities they had captured. Alaric rubbed his temples as he racked his brains. Is there any word from Leonard's side? Giovanni shook his head. We haven't gotten any news from their side since they told us that Helona has been conquered. Alaric narrowed his eyes. Did they cut off our communication since that day? Giovanni. I think the enemies are already marching towards us. Alaric muttered. No way. I just received word that Atarkin has fallen. How is that even possible? Giovanni couldn't believe it. It could be a ploy to make us think that they are still in Atarkin. Alaric became more nervous the more he thought about it. There were only two options for the enemy troops. The first one was to march towards Helona and the other was to march towards Midgard. If he were the enemy commander, he would choose the weaker side, which was them. Only one venerable was leading the Estanian troops in Midgard, and that was Ignatius. Giovanni's face darkened. He stood up and said, I will go look for Lord Ignatius. We need to tell him this. Wait. Alaric grabbed his shoulder. I will go with you. We need to discuss this together. Giovanni nodded. The two didn't waste any time and headed straight to the mansion where Ignatius was staying. When they arrived at the mansion, the servants took them to the balcony on the second floor. Your Highnesses, what is going on? Ignatius felt that something was amiss when he saw their grim faces. He put down the tea he was drinking and gestured for them to sit down. Tell me what happened. Alaric and Giovanni nodded at each other before they told him everything. My lord, we received a message from... Ignatius' face turned grave upon hearing their words. If Atarkin has fallen, our people on Mount Tyrad might have already perished. He had the same guess as they. We need to act immediately. If what you said is true, Harun's 500,000 troops should be heading towards Midgard. Yes, my lord. We will gather all the available troops and tell them to get ready. Giovanni nodded solemnly and was about to leave when Ignatius suddenly stopped him. Hold on. Is there something else, my lord? Giovanni furrowed his eyebrows. The warriors and aristocrats of Midgard might sense that something is going on if we do something this big. It's also possible that they are already aware of the situation. Ignatius spoke with a frown. At this moment, more than a fourth of their warriors were still recovering from the recent battle, so the troops weren't in their full force. With the condition of their warriors, it would be a disaster if they had to fight against an army of 500,000 soldiers. Not to mention that the warriors of Midgard could stab them in the back at any moment. They were in a dangerous position right now and their options were limited. Hearing his words, the two princes fell into deep thought. Excluding those who are recovering, how many of our warriors can still fight? The venerable asked in a low voice. Alaric sent Giovanni a knowing look. The latter had more interactions with the troops, so he could give a more accurate answer regarding this matter. Understanding his gaze, Giovanni immediately replied. From the recent report I received, we should have about 140,000 warriors who can still fight. If we include those who have some minor wounds, we would have an additional 20,000 soldiers. Ignatius let out a deep breath. Their situation was more terrible than he had thought. Gather everyone, including those who can still wield their weapons. We need every man we can get. Ignatius instructed with a heavy look. Yes, my lord. Giovanni nodded, stood up, and left in haste. After he left, Ignatius turned his head to Alaric and said, "Your Highness, please send your men to scout the area. We need to find the exact whereabouts of the enemies. If they could get the exact location of the approaching army, they would be able to react properly." Alaric knew this, so he nodded without hesitation. "We will do our best, my lord." Ignatius waved his hand to dismiss him. Alaric didn't linger and left right away. Now left alone on the balcony, Ignatius was no longer in the mood to drink his tea. He stood up and looked at the horizon with a deep sigh. Alaric headed back to his mansion. Upon his arrival, he immediately formed 10 scouting teams, each led by a transcendent knight. The teams he gathered were curious why they had been summoned so urgently. By the looks on Alaric's face, they could tell that something bad had happened. Looking at the 10 scouting teams, Alaric first informed them about the recent news they received. When everyone heard that their comrades on Atarkan and Mount Tyrad might have already perished, they were distraught. "Your mission is to track the enemy's location. I will send each of your teams to the 10 possible routes that they might have taken. If you encounter them, don't engage in battle and report back to me immediately." Alaric called the 10 transcendent knights who would lead each team. He then told them where each of their teams would go. "If you have any questions, you can ask them now." No one raised any questions, so Alaric quickly sent them off. "I hope all of you will come back unharmed," Alaric mumbled as he watched them leave. On Helona's side, Leonard had also received the same message. At first, he thought it was just the same regular report, but his face changed abruptly as soon as he read the contents of the letter. He rose to his feet with a dark expression. "I miscalculated. I thought that man was in Nakalub." He gritted his teeth, his face warping with anger. "I need to calm down. What could be their possible move after recapturing Atarkan and Mount Tyrad?" He gathered his thoughts. A few seconds later, his eyes flashed with a glint. "Midgard. They are heading to Midgard." Thinking about this, he looked to his left and shouted to the nearest servant, "Quickly go and call the Venerables." "Never mind. I will go find them myself." Without wasting time, he abandoned what he was doing and left the mansion. Half an hour later, he brought the Venerables to Helona's city hall, including Leroy, who had defected to their side. "Why did you call us here so urgently, Your Highness?" Lucas stared at the Crown Prince with a serious look. Leroy was already aware of Leonard's identity, so he wasn't surprised by how Lucas had addressed him. "Venerables, Midgard might be in danger right now. I don't have time to explain, so I will make it short." The Crown Prince summarized the situation for them. He told them about the fall of Mount Tyrad and Atarkan. "Are you saying that the enemy troops might be heading to Midgard?" Lucas couldn't sit still when he heard this. His son was in Midgard. Although they had Ignatius on their side, he was still concerned about Alaric's safety. Leonard shook his head and spoke with uncertainty. "To tell you the truth, I am not entirely certain, but there is a high chance that they are heading there." The Venerables frowned. "No, I know that guy. He is the most unpredictable person among us." Leroy suddenly spoke. His words brought more concern to the group. "What do you mean?" Lucas sent him a deep look. Leroy took a deep breath and responded. "Ramondan Hildebrand is one crazy man. No one can accurately predict what he will do next." Ramondan Hildebrand was a 4-ringed beast soul grandmaster like Leroy Durova, but unlike the latter whose integrated monster traits were diverse, Ramondan's traits were focused primarily on offense. The one-man army, that is his nickname. Leroy spoke in a serious voice. The key reason for him getting this nickname is because of one of his integrated monster traits called Gravity Collapse. It's a trait he got from a dimensional abyss spider, a catastrophe-grade beast. He explained, his eyes visibly shook when he mentioned this monster. Lucas and Dominic weren't familiar with this monster, but the knowledgeable Crown Prince had read about it in a book. It was a beast capable of manipulating gravity. With this unique ability, it could immobilize an army of hundreds of thousands of soldiers. "Ramondan, can we beat that person?" Leonard asked with a deep look. Hearing this, Leroy took a deep breath and shook his head. To be honest, even I am not confident in defeating him. He could render my golem incapable of fighting with just his gravity collapse. Not to mention his other traits. His words made everyone's faces turn grave. Leroy was a powerful man, and he also had a golem that was almost unkillable. For him to speak so highly of someone spoke volumes about Ramondan's power. Is there any way to beat him? Does he have a weakness? Lucas asked. Leroy fell silent for a moment. After half a minute of silence, he opened his mouth and spoke. Ramondan is considered the strongest venerable of Harun. He was unbeatable for a long time until he met her. Esquila Veronica, the Queen of Veronica. When he mentioned this name, an image of a beautiful woman flashed in everyone's mind. Esquila Veronica was a woman who rose to power after killing the tyrannical ruler of her country. She wasn't just beautiful. She was also considered the most powerful warrior in the surrounding empires. As you all know, Queen Esquila is a warrior focused on speed. She is so fast that it is almost impossible to detect her. Even venerables would have a hard time following her movements. Is this story related to the Harun-Veronica War 25 years ago? Leonard suddenly asked while Leroy was in the middle of his storytelling. Leroy nodded. Yes, Your Highness. Skip the story and just tell us how she defeated Ramondan, the Crown Prince said. Leroy awkwardly chuckled. I apologize. You see, Ramondan would need some time to cast his gravity collapse. It's a skill that requires him to use his mana to tap into. He was about to go into the specifics when he noticed the Crown Prince's stern face. To make it short, he needs about 5 to 10 seconds to cast this skill. Queen Esquila managed to take him down before he could cast it. So we just need to be fast enough to defeat him. Lucas muttered to himself. He was confident in his strength and speed, but he was uncertain if he could take down an experienced venerable in a short amount of time. While he was immersed in his thoughts, the Crown Prince's voice suddenly drifted into their ears. What do you think, my lords? Can you take down that person before he can cast his skill? Lucas didn't respond and turned his head to Dominic. Sensing his gaze, Dominic rubbed his chin and replied hesitantly. It's difficult to say. I have faced Ramondan before, but he still didn't have his gravity collapse at that time. Leonard frowned at his words. Even Lord Dominic is not confident. This is troublesome. At this moment, Leroy spoke once more. There is another way to beat him. Hearing this, everyone stared at him with furrowed eyebrows. Leroy did a throat-slitting gesture and said, Assassination! Didn't you just say that only Queen Esquila managed to defeat him? How can we assassinate someone like that? Lucas felt that it was ridiculous. Leroy shook his head and explained. He might possess one of the most powerful integrated monster traits, but he is still, after all, a human being. There are also times when he lowers his guard. Leonard was initially uninterested, but when he heard Leroy's words, he revealed a pondering look. That might work, but is there even someone who can do this job? Lucas and Dominic are powerful warriors, but their auras are too conspicuous. If they appear near Ramondan, he would immediately sense them. Leroy also isn't fit for this role. Just who is perf? Suddenly, he thought about a certain individual. If it's him, he might be able to pull it off. A few miles west of Midgard was a narrow creek that was covered in blooming purple water lilies. The fragrant floral scent lingered in the air, giving the surrounding area a pleasant smell. Walking along this creek was a team composed of 20 lightly dressed warriors. It was almost difficult to spot them since their green uniforms camouflaged perfectly with the greenery. They also covered their skin with ground paste made from all sorts of leaves to mask their scents. Sir, we are only half a mile away from Dash. One of the camouflaged warriors was about to give his report when the person leading them suddenly did a shushing gesture. I see them. Sikas pointed in a certain direction. The average warrior wouldn't be able to see it, but he could see a large number of dots moving in sync. Hearing his words, his subordinates followed his gaze only to be left baffled. They couldn't see anything. All they could see was the vast grassland and the lush forest in the distance. Sir, Is it the warriors of Harun? One of his subordinates asked. Sikas nodded. I can't tell their exact numbers, but there are hundreds of thousands of them. Sir, how can you see them when you are dash? A blind man cannot see through his eyes, but he can see the world through his mana. He tried to explain, but it only made his subordinates even more confused. Sir, we should return and report the situation to His Highness. One of his subordinates suggested with a hint of urgency. Their mission was only to locate the enemies, so there was no need for them to stay. Sikas didn't respond immediately. I can sense him. This is the aura of a venerable. Leave and immediately send word to His Highness about the situation. He instructed in a calm voice. What about you, sir? Without turning his head, Sikas urged them. Just go. After some hesitation, his subordinates glanced at each other and left with haste. They didn't know what Sikas was planning, but the most important thing now was to inform Alaric about the enemy's location. As soon as his subordinates left, Sikas's figure vanished from where he was hidden. Then, like a ghost, he reappeared 100 meters away. I need to get some information about the enemy venerable so we will know how to deal with them. Thinking about this, he quietly slipped into the grassland, camouflaging himself within the greenery. I will destroy them all. I will spare no one. Ramandan was seething with rage and everyone could feel it. No one dared to get close to him, afraid that they would incur his wrath. When he learned that 3 of their cities had fallen into the hands of the Estanian troops, he quickly gathered his army to recapture the conquered cities. Their first target was Mount Tyrad. There were Estanian troops stationed at the mountain, but Ramandan's army quickly annihilated them. The second target was Atarkan. There was quite some resistance when they fought the stationed enemy troops, but Ramandan suddenly joined the fight and ended the battle in a bloodbath. After recapturing Atarkan, he didn't even bother to get some rest. He led his troops to the third target, Midgard. My lord, we are only a few miles from Midgard. Do you want me to send our vanguard units to check the route? A voice interrupted his thoughts. Ramandan nodded with a frown. If you see those Estanian soldiers, kill them immediately. Yes, my lord. At this moment, Ramandan suddenly narrowed his eyes. What was that? He felt as if he was being watched, but no matter where he looked, he didn't find anything unusual. Did I make a mistake? No. An enemy is nearby, and it is someone skilled in camouflage. If he were alone here, he would have already used his gravity collapse, but he couldn't activate his skill with his subordinates around. With a stern look, he beckoned to his deputy, an old warrior with sunken eyes. What is your command, my lord? The old warrior saluted. Rado, send 10 teams to scout the area. If you discover anything unusual, report to me immediately. He instructed. I obey your commands. The old warrior named Rado nodded, turned around, and left to complete the task. He noticed my gaze, but he failed to detect my location. Sikas saw Ramandan sending his troops to scout the forest and the grassland. Should I kill him here? No, not yet. I need more information. The thought of killing the enemy venerable crossed his mind, but he quickly restrained himself. He decided to quietly observe his prey. There are people approaching me. He turned his head and saw a 5-man team searching near his hiding spot. Seeing this, he quietly took out 5 needles from his wrist guy and threw them at the approaching team. Sue! Sue! In the next moment, the 5-man team collapsed, their foreheads bleeding profusely. As for Sikas, he had already left to change his hiding spot. The smell, a familiar scent, assaulted Ramandan's nostrils. Blood! With a dark look, he rushed towards the direction of the scent and discovered something alarming. Lying on the grass were 5 men whose faces were drenched in blood. Furrowing his eyebrows, he crouched and inspected the wounds on their foreheads. He then looked around to see if there was something he could find, but except for the corpses, there was nothing to be seen. They were all killed at the same time. They weren't even able to sense the culprit and died in an instant. Whoever killed them is a highly skilled assassin. Knowing that an assassin was lurking nearby, he sent more troops to scour the area. His soldiers thoroughly searched the forest, but they weren't able to find anything. My lord! Another scouting team was killed. An anxious voice drifted into Ramondan's ears. What? Ramondan was infuriated. He kept his senses active the entire time, but he wasn't even able to detect the enemy. With a grim look, he went to the location where the second scouting team was killed. When he arrived, he discovered that they also died in the same way. This is clearly done by one person. Is it a mythical knight? He frowned. Just when he was about to tell his subordinates to bury the dead, he heard another report. My lord, 2 more scouting teams were killed. Lord Rado also died. This time he felt a trace of fear. Rado was no ordinary warrior. He was a peak transcendent knight, the strongest warrior under his command. For such a strong man to die without even emitting a sound, it left everyone scared. They even began to suspect that the enemy had already disguised himself as one of them. Everyone was on guard with each other, and the panic spread to the rest of the troops. Take off your helmet. Show me your face. Why are you looking at me like that, you bastard? The warriors were in disarray, which greatly affected their formation. Meanwhile, the culprit behind this attack was now hidden atop a tree, observing the commotion with indifferent eyes. I will kill a few more people and cause disturbances. This should buy us enough time to make some preparations. Thinking about this, he jumped off the tree and blended into the greenery. Ramondan's face darkened when he saw his troops in chaos. What a sly bastard! He is killing the scout teams I sent one by one as if to mock me. Ramondan's face contorted with fury. He quickly ordered the scout teams to return and regrouped with the main army. If I lose more men here, the troops' morale would drop. I can't let that bastard kill more of my men. As soon as he passed the order, the scattered scout teams returned to the main army. After his men had returned, Ramondan coldly observed the forest. I will show you why they called me the one-man army. Thinking about this, he raised his fist and shouted to his troops. Step back, all of you. His authoritative voice echoed across the forest. The warriors seemed to have realized what he was about to do, so they quickly moved away from him. In the next moment, Ramondan released his mana in the targeted location, which was the forest in front of him. Less than 10 seconds later, a heavy force came crushing onto the targeted area, toppling everything as if a meteorite had fallen onto the surface. Boom! A thick cloud of dust covered the air as the landscape fell into ruins. The warriors were stunned when they saw the lush forest collapse into ruins in just an instant. Most of them had already witnessed Ramondan display his power, but even until now, his ability still didn't fail to impress them. The fear they felt earlier vanished like a puff of smoke. Ramondan narrowed his eyes as if he could see through everything behind the cloud of dust. He is not here anymore. Did he leave, or is he still lurking nearby? Keep your eyes peeled. The enemy might be hidden somewhere. All of you should stay in groups of 10, and you must never move alone, he shouted to the troops. That should be enough for now. I must go back and report my discovery to His Highness. Sikas sent the distant Ramondan a deep look. He couldn't see his face, but with his unique perception, Ramondan's figure was imprinted in his mind. Whoosh! Alaric was in the study of his mansion looking at the map plastered on the wall. This was a map of Midgard which also depicted the various landscapes that surrounded the city. Just where could they be? He mumbled with a frown. You've been looking at that map for a while now. Why don't you get some rest? A pleasant voice drifted into his ears. It was Ivana. Alaric turned around and raised an eyebrow. You are usually at the clinic helping the medical practitioners. Why did you visit me today? The elven princess had become more mature after the recent battles they had experienced. She used to complain a lot over trivial matters, but she gradually stopped doing them. She even started helping the medical practitioners at the clinic. Compared to her past self, it could be said that she had become more reliable and mature. Ivana crossed her arms and replied in a chiding tone. Are you saying that I am not welcome here? Of course not. Alaric nervously laughed. I have mostly been at the clinic since we came to this city. I didn't even have much time to rest or recover my mana since there are so many injured warriors to take care of. After all that work, I think I deserve a day off. You're right. You deserve a day off. Alaric didn't bother to argue with her. Enough about me. Why have you been looking at that map for so long? Is there something I don't know about? Ivana was mostly at the clinic, so she wasn't aware of the current situation. Alaric was about to respond when a series of knocks on the door interrupted their conversation. Knock, knock, knock. Alaric sent Ivana an apologetic look before he shouted. The door is unlocked. You may come in. Creak. Einar, the commander of the undaunted heavy cavalry, stepped inside the room. When he noticed that Ivana was inside, he lowered his head respectfully. My lady. Although it wasn't official yet, he believed that the elven princess would soon become Alaric's second wife. Ivana waved her hand indifferently. You two can discuss your matters. Einar hesitated for a moment, but he saw Alaric nodding in confirmation. Seeing this, he took out the letter from his inner pocket and handed it to Alaric. Your Highness, I received a letter from Sir Sikis's team. They sent it with a special marking, so it must be urgent. Hearing this, Alaric took the letter. Just like he said, there was indeed a red marking on the letter. Upon reading the contents of the letter, his expression suddenly turned grim. The forest near the creek. Written on the letter was the reported location of the enemies. Alaric quickly walked towards the map and stared intently at the location indicated on the letter. So they are here. He realized that the enemies were a lot closer than he had thought. Sir Einar, tell the troops to get ready. Harun's troops are marching towards the city. He instructed with a flourish of his sleeve. I will deliver your instructions to the troops. Einar responded with a stern look. Knowing that the situation was urgent, he didn't linger for long and left right away after bidding them farewell. What is going on, Alaric? How did the enemy reinforcements get this close to us without our knowledge? Ivana exclaimed as she rose to her feet. Alaric shook his head and replied in a solemn tone. We didn't predict this to happen. We only learned the situation recently when... He told her about what happened to Mount Tyrad and Atarkan. What? They have 500,000 warriors. Ivana was stunned. They only had fewer than 200,000 warriors, and a fourth of them were injured. Moreover, they were within the enemy territory and the warriors of Midgard could betray them at any moment. We are done for. How can we make it out of here? When the Estanian troops in Midgard received the order, they immediately went to the walls to prepare. Various artillery weapons were set up atop the walls. The auxiliary units also brought ammunition and supplies. Their sudden military activity caused the city's residents to feel alarmed. At this moment, inside Marlin's residence, the surviving influential people of Midgard had gathered to discuss the situation. General, do you have any idea what's happening out there? Why did the Estanian troops suddenly move to the walls? Maybe the reinforcements from other cities are coming. This is our chance. Everyone discussed heatedly. Marlin took a deep breath as he rubbed his temples. The Estanian troops sent his subordinates away from the walls, so they had no idea what was happening. I have already sent a small group to keep an eye on the situation beyond the walls. We should hear from them any time now, he told the crowd. During the commotion, he suspected that their troops were coming, so he secretly sent a small unit to confirm if he was right. General, if there are reinforcements outside, we should help them. We can just lower the gates so their troops can enter the city. They must be punished for killing our people. Because of them, so many of our warriors died. With a sigh, Marlin replied, I understand your point, everyone, but we must proceed with caution. We are still unsure what is happening out there, so we should wait for the confirmation from the people I sent. But, if there are really reinforcements outside, I will be the first one to stab the Estanian troops in the back. He spoke in a cold voice. Hearing this, everyone felt a chill. Marlin was the strongest person in the room, so everyone was threatened by his aura. Meanwhile, the scout teams that Alaric sent out of the city to search for the enemy's whereabouts had already returned, including Sikis and his subordinates. Upon his return, Sikis immediately informed Alaric about his discovery. So it's indeed him, the last venerable that Harun sent to protect its borders. Alaric furrowed his eyebrows. He sent Sikas a deep look and asked, "Did you say that he can control gravity at will?" "Yes, Your Highness. He can make gravity heavier by manifolds." Sikas calmly nodded. Hearing this, Alaric's face darkened. There were only a few monsters who could control gravity, and all of them were incredibly powerful creatures. Facing a venerable with this kind of monster-integrated trait would be extremely troublesome. If he can manipulate gravity, sending out our troops to fight them would be useless. What do you think, Lord Ignatius? Do you have the confidence to beat this man? Alaric turned his head to Ignatius, who was seated opposite him. Ignatius's expression was solemn as he replied, "I have heard rumors about this venerable who can manipulate gravity, but I haven't fought with him yet." Alaric furrowed his eyebrows. If Lord Ignatius is defeated in battle, all of our troops would die here. While he was immersed in his thoughts, Sikas's emotionless voice drifted into his ears. "My lord, I might be able to help you deal with him." Alaric raised an eyebrow. "And how do you plan on dealing with him?" Everyone was also stunned. They were talking about a four-ringed beast soul grandmaster here, so they were a bit skeptical. However, Sikas wasn't the type of guy who would speak nonsense, so they were eager to hear his response. Under everyone's curious eyes, Sikas spoke with unchanging emotion. "That man is overly reliant on his gravity manipulation that his perception has stagnated. If he fights with Lord Ignatius, his focus will be completely on him, and I can take that chance to kill him." They all thought that he had some kind of meticulously laid-out plan, but when they heard the simple strategy, they were left speechless. "Pardon my disrespect, Sir Sikas, but we are talking about a four-ringed beast soul grandmaster here. His senses might be weaker compared to other venerables. This is an expert that must not be underestimated." Giovanni thought that it was incredulous for a transcendent knight to speak of assassinating a four-ringed beast soul grandmaster with such confidence. Ignatius didn't say anything, but he agreed with the second prince. Venerables possessed an innate skill that other warriors didn't have. It was the ability to control a domain. They could freely manipulate the element they had an affinity within this domain, which means inside this domain they were invincible. The only exception would be if there was someone who had a much stronger domain. Sikas indifferently glanced at the second prince. His distinct, unusually white pupils made the latter flinch with nervousness. "Those who have been targeted by my daggers had never survived, not even venerables." Except for Alaric, everyone's eyes widened upon hearing his words. You killed venerables before?" Giovanni exclaimed in shock. This was an extraordinary feat. There were some stories written in history books about this, but none had been verified, so everyone thought that it was impossible. However, not everyone present felt that he was lying. Sikas was about to respond, but he suddenly closed his mouth as if something was preventing him from speaking. The others thought that he simply didn't want to explain it, but Alaric realized what was happening. Something is preventing him from speaking more. He had seen this situation every time he tried to ask Galliner, Butch, and Sikas about their pasts. "Let's try it," Alaric spoke, his words gathering everyone's attention. Giovanni no longer dared to say anything. He was afraid that it might offend Sikas. Meanwhile, Ignatius thought for a moment before nodding his head. "All right, since Sir Sikas is confident, there is no harm in giving it a try. We can just retreat if we fail." "Good." Alaric smiled faintly. With Ignatius's approval, the plan was set into motion. The military officers didn't even dare voice their objections. Ramondan's army was still stuck in the forest near the creek outside of Midgard. The warriors were on edge, afraid that they would be the next target of the assassin. A few hours had passed since the last victims were killed, but they still hadn't found the culprit. Ramondan had already razed the surrounding trees and landscapes to the ground, but he couldn't even find the assassin's shadow. Damn it! Where did he go? He finally realized that he had been fooled. It was only a deliberate act to make them waste time and delay their march. Thinking about this, he shouted to his troops, "We must delay no further. We are heading straight to Midgard to destroy the enemies. Destroy the enemies. Kill them all." The warriors echoed his words. Ramandan led his troops to march towards Midgard. Due to the size of their army, it took them several hours before they arrived outside the city. Looking at the familiar walls, Ramandan furrowed his eyebrows. He could see the flags of Estania erected atop the walls, fluttering along with the wind. How dare those bastards plant their filthy flags in our lands? He almost flew into rage, but held back his fury. At this moment, he suddenly felt a strong aura atop the city walls. HM? He narrowed his eyes and looked in the direction of the aura. How arrogant! Is he intentionally pissing me off by releasing his aura? Taking a deep breath, he raised his head and shouted in a booming voice. People of Midgard, hear my voice. I am Ramandan Hildebrand, the one-man army, the strongest warrior of Harun. I have come here with 500,000 warriors to save you all. Just give me half a day and I promise you that the Estanian dogs will be annihilated. His words, filled with confidence and spite, echoed across the city, shocking everyone to their core. Everyone in Harun was familiar with the name Ramandan Hildebrand. He was the symbol of their power and strength. Knowing that he was outside the city, the residents of Midgard were excited. Ramandan Hildebrand, is it? I am Ignatius Firecrest, the man who killed Rudner Crestor. A loud, mocking voice suddenly reverberated across all of Midgard. Hearing this, Ramandan's face contorted with rage. Rudner Crestor was his friend and mentor. He was like an older brother to him. Knowing that Rudner's killer was right in front of his eyes, the rage that he was trying to hold back could no longer be contained. You bastard! Come out and face me if you dare! He bellowed, his earth-shattering voice ringing in everyone's ears. Do you think I am afraid of a runt like you? Ignatius responded in a disdainful tone. Following his words, a blazing bird flew into the sky. Upon looking closely, everyone realized that it was no blazing bird. It was a man covered in flames, hovering above the sky like the god of fire. Seeing his spectacular display of power, everyone was amazed, except for one person. Paltry tricks. Ramandan snorted as he released his aura. All of you step back. You wouldn't want to be caught in this battle, he shouted to his troops. Hearing his warning, his troops immediately retreated by a few hundred meters. At this moment, Ignatius descended from the sky and landed gracefully with a whoosh. With a taunting smile, he said, "Show me the strength of the so-called one-man army." With a dark look, Ramandan stepped forward while silently covering the area within his domain. You will pay for killing him. I will skin you alive and hang your corpse on the wall to be feasted upon by the birds. He spoke coldly, his voice shaking with fury. With a snort, Ignatius activated his flame domain. Fire sprouted from out of nowhere and engulfed everything around him in a sea of flames. As soon as he released his domain, the surrounding temperature abruptly rose, making everyone feel like they were being cooked. Despite being far from him, the warriors were forced to gather their mana to shield themselves from his flames. Sensing his fire domain, Ramandan furrowed his eyebrows. So this is Ignatius Firecrest. He is indeed strong. He was aware that Ignatius was the biggest reason why Harun failed their last expedition. Facing this kind of man, he didn't dare to be careless. In the next moment, the two venerables unleashed their attacks. Ignatius summoned thousands of fire arrows that shot towards Ramandan like an endless stream of flames. Su! 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 With a cold gaze, Ramandan activated his gravity collapse. The sudden explosion of weight caused the fire arrows to lose their balance in midair. They gradually lost power and dissipated. If that's the extent of your power, then you'd better surrender now. I might even grant you a quick death if you beg me. Ramandan laughed coldly. Ignatius sneered in response. He raised his hand into the air and conjured a gigantic flaming sword. It was so big that it covered all of Midgard in its shadow. Try stopping this, he shouted as he released the gigantic flaming sword towards Ramandan. Ramandan's troops shivered in fear when they saw this. This attack alone would kill tens of thousands of them in an instant. This time, Ramandan finally became serious. He released more mana into the air and unleashed a more fearsome force that increased the gravity by almost 20-fold. Boom! The ground within his gravity domain sank deeply, causing a cloud of dust to rise and fall. Ignatius, who was within the domain, almost fell to his knees. He felt as if a heavy mountain was pressing down on him. Just where is the limit of his power? Gritting his teeth, he stimulated his mana to keep himself steady. He could feel his internal organs screaming from the intense pressure. I need to get out of his domain. Thinking about this, he summoned a pair of flaming wings to fly out of his enemy's domain. Do you think I will let you leave? Ignatius flapped his flame wings when an even stronger force came crushing down on him. What heavy pressure! The overwhelming weight that descended upon his body kept him in place, preventing him from flying away. Gritting his teeth, Ignatius released more mana to control his flame wings, but it was to no avail. Just give up. Once you are inside my gravity domain, escaping is impossible. Ramondan shook his head. Give up. Ignatius laughed coldly as if he'd heard the funniest joke. With a mocking grin, he suddenly snapped his fingers. Ramondan felt something was amiss, but it was already too late when he realized what had happened. The ground beneath his feet suddenly caught fire, and this roaring flame quickly enveloped his entire body. Ramondan's skin turned red at the sudden exposure to the extreme heat. To protect himself, he hurriedly covered his body with a thin layer of mana, which acted like a barrier that stopped the flame from touching his skin. However, despite this layer of protection, he could still feel the unbearable heat from the scorching flames. He intends to clash with my gravity domain. The golden flames enveloped the area around them, looking like a miniature sun, blazing like an inferno. Under the intense heat, Ramondan was forced to use a portion of his mana to protect his vital organs. This made his gravity domain significantly weaker. The drop in the pressure gave Ignatius some room to breathe. I now have the upper hand, but using my mana like this places a huge burden on my energy core. I cannot maintain my flame domain for very long. He could only hope that Sekus would take the opportunity to attack before he ran out of mana. Don't mess this up, Sekus. Otherwise, we're all dead. While the two venerables were fighting, there was an uprising inside the city. Marlon and the heads of the aristocratic houses gathered their subordinates to attack the Estanian troops. They timed their attack perfectly while everyone was focused on the venerables' battle. Kill them all. Open the gates. Marlon roared as he charged on horseback with thousands of cavalrymen. Surprisingly, they realized that the road was unusually empty. There were no Estanian troops stationed in the streets. It was like they had suddenly disappeared. Confused by the situation, Marlon raised his hand with a deep frown, signaling his troops to stop charging. Strange. Where are they? Why is this place empty? Up ahead was one of the city's main gates. They just had to cross the street and they would get to their objective. However, Marlon felt a sense of foreboding. It was as if something was gripping his heart and could crush it any moment. I don't like this feeling. He looked around, trying to sense if there were enemies hidden somewhere, but he couldn't detect anything unusual. General, we are close to the gates. We should take this chance while there is no one around. One of his subordinates exclaimed. Hearing this, Marlon hesitated. Hold on. There is something strange about the situation. Why would they leave the main gate unprotected at this crucial moment? Unbeknownst to him, one of the people behind him revealed a mysterious expression beneath his helmet. Slowly, he took out a dagger hidden underneath his armor and threw it towards Marlon. Whoosh! The unexpected attack caught everyone by surprise. Just when the dagger was about to hit Marlon's head, a figure suddenly appeared to block it for him. Clang! General, be careful. Marlon was stunned. He didn't expect to be attacked by someone on his side. He felt betrayed. With a furious look, he unsheathed his sword and pointed it at the attacker. Who are you? Lift your helmet. Everyone drew their swords and glared at the attacker. The culprit remained calm in the face of their death stares. He lifted a hand and reached out to his helmet. After he took off his helmet, everyone gasped in astonishment. You are Sir Redden? Marlin immediately recognized the other party. It was Redden, one of Alaric's direct subordinates, a transcendent knight with unparalleled might. He hadn't fought with Redden before, but the latter's aura was so strong that he was intimidated by it. "Get back, all of you!" Marlin shouted to his men, but before everyone could react, Redden suddenly made his move. He brandished his sword in one circular motion. Whoosh! In the blink of an eye, all the cavalrymen around him had their heads detached from their bodies. He was so quick that they only realized what had happened when the headless corpses fell off their horses. "Kill him! Avenge our comrades!" The warriors were furious when they saw their friends getting killed. "Wait!" Marlin wanted to stop them, but his voice drowned in the midst of the cavalrymen's loud battle cries. In the next moment, something unbelievable happened. The tens of cavalrymen who had charged towards Redden were slaughtered mercilessly with just a few strikes of the latter's sword. His armor was drenched in blood, but his face remained utterly cold. This time, the cavalrymen finally realized that they couldn't overpower him with numbers alone. Only Marlin and the few transcendent knights could fight him. Sensing their gazes, Marlin gritted his teeth and raised his sword into the air. "Transcendent knights, we are close to the main gate. We just need to kill this man and freedom will be ours. Kill him." As soon as he gave the instruction, he kicked his horse's belly and roared with a face filled with determination. "Die, Estanian bastard!" Several transcendent knights followed right after him, brandishing their weapons with heavy force. Looking at the approaching cavalrymen, Redden narrowed his eyes. A strong surge of mana gushed out of him as he stimulated his energy core. He then moved like a mirage and slashed out his sword in several directions. Whoosh! Whoosh! KHSHK! KHSHK! Marlin was shocked by his abrupt increase in speed. He hastily lifted his sword to protect himself, but the force behind Redden's attack sent him flying off from his horse. What unbelievable strength! Unlike Marlin, the other transcendent knights weren't as lucky. 2 of them were immediately killed, while the rest were heavily injured. All this happened in just a minute. The cavalrymen were stunned. They never thought that a single person could defeat several transcendent knights on his own. Redden, who was silent the entire time, spoke in an indifferent tone. "You guys are insufferably weak. Didn't you know that there are different levels between transcendent knights? We might be in the same realm, but you are so much weaker than me. To think that you would actually dare to stab us in the back with this pathetic strength? How laughable!" The thick mockery in his voice made everyone furious. "Stab you in the back?" Marlin snorted as he picked up his injured body. "We were never in the same team from the very start. You are enemies who have killed our people and invaded our lands." Redden furrowed his eyebrows. "His Highness was benevolent enough to spare you worthless lives, but you didn't even cherish the chance he had given you, as expected of a Harunian. You guys never fail to disappoint me." Filled with rage at his mockery, Marlin rushed towards him and roared, "Warriors of Midgard, he is alone. There is no need to fear him. Charge with me and kill him." Redden let out a deep breath. "What makes you think that I am alone?" As soon as his words fell, the ground suddenly trembled, forcing Marlin and his subordinates to take an abrupt halt. With a horrified look, Marlin saw that the empty street was now surrounded by thousands of fully equipped Estanian warriors. It was a trap. They were already expecting us to betray them. His face changed dramatically. It wasn't just him. The cavalrymen he brought were also terrified. All the escape routes had been blocked, leaving them with no room to escape. "General, what should we do?" one of his subordinates anxiously asked. Marlin's face was covered in sweat. He looked around, trying to find a way out, but the defense was so tight that even an ant couldn't escape. Suddenly, a familiar voice drifted into his ears. "General Marlin, I was wrong about you." Marlin looked in the direction of the voice and saw Alaric approaching on his horse. "Alaric, Your Highness!" Marlin trembled upon seeing him, his face filled with regret. Alaric sighed, his face gradually turning cold as he muttered, "General Marlin, Do you know what I hate the most? Marlon didn't know how to respond, so he could only stare at Alaric with a blank look. Betrayal. When people stab me in the back. I hate that feeling, Alaric muttered. Marlon wanted to say something, but Alaric suddenly raised his hand and shouted, "Kill them all! Leave none alive!" In the next moment, the Estanian troops charged at them with full force. Seeing this, Marlon quickly reacted. "Warriors of Midgard, we need to break out of this encirclement and head straight to the main gate. Once we open the gates, Lord Ramondan's troops will annihilate the Estanian army. Charge with me." Marlon led his men to focus on attacking in one direction. However, there was a big problem. A giant warrior holding a broadsword appeared out of nowhere and fearlessly rushed towards them. Sir Galliner. Marlon was so scared when he saw this man. His knees almost buckled under the pressure. But since he was leading the charge, he could only grit his teeth and push on. Shit. Why did he have to be here? If it's only Redden, we would still have a chance, but this guy, he had seen Galliner fight. He was also a transcendent knight just like him, but the difference in their strength was like comparing heaven and earth. Whoosh! With a swing of Galliner's broadsword, dozens of cavalrymen were cut in half. Even their horses weren't spared. Marlon managed to evade at the right time, so he came out unscathed. But all of the transcendent knights who had followed him were killed. They couldn't even scream and died in just a single move. Oh no! He is too strong. There is no way we could go past him. Galliner's power made him lose all hope. Escape. I need to get out of here. He turned around and was about to escape when a big hand suddenly grasped his neck. Cake. The strong grip made him breathless. He subconsciously let go of his sword as he struggled to break free. You could have lived if you had only followed what you were told to do. Galliner's deep voice echoed behind him. Hearing this, Marlon opened his mouth and tried to speak, but only unintelligible words came out. I don't want to hear your worthless explanations. Galliner exerted more strength in his hand. Crack. The sound of bones being crushed echoed. After crushing Marlon's neck, Galliner yanked off his head and ruthlessly threw it into the ground. Still unsatisfied, he lifted his foot and stepped onto the head, crushing it into a bloody pulp. Splat. Marlon, the last general of Midgard, died just like that. Seeing their general die, the warriors of Midgard were overwhelmed with grief and anger. They furiously charged towards Galliner, hoping to avenge Marlon. Kill him. Avenge the general. Galliner snorted and swung his broadsword with terrifying intensity. Whoosh! More than 100 warriors were killed in an instant, covering the street in blood and mangled bodies. With no more transcendent knights to lead them, the remaining cavalrymen of Midgard were soon slaughtered. They couldn't even fight back. It was an overwhelming defeat. Looking at the corpses that littered the street, Alaric let out a sigh while shaking his head. Marlon, I tried to be lenient with your people, but you led them into ruin. You have only yourself to blame for this tragedy. He looked away from the gruesome mess and ordered his men. Search for the remaining enemies and kill them if they resist. Yes, your highness. While the Estanian army was dealing with the uprising in Midgard, the battle between Ramondan and Ignatius became more intense. The area around them had been turned upside down with the constant clash of their domains. When viewed from above, one might mistake their battlefield as an active volcano with all the flames and burnt rocks. Boom! Suddenly, an earth-shattering explosion rang out. At the epicenter of this chaos, Ignatius and Ramondan stood 100 meters from each other. Ramondan's skin had severe burn marks. Half of his face was burned, making him look hideous. On the other hand, his opponent, Ignatius, wasn't any better. The guy's armor was in an utter mess with various dents and holes. He was also bleeding from a large ruptured wound on his chest. Ignatius was breathing heavily while injecting mana into the wound on his chest. I need to stop the bleeding. If he didn't infuse his wound with mana, he would suffer from severe blood loss. Even to a venerable, losing too much blood would be fatal. You don't look good, Ignatius. Why don't you just obediently offer your head, so I can end your suffering? Ramondan spoke with a cold smile. Ignatius sneered at his words. You talk as if you are in better condition. Do you think I'm blind? The two engaged in a brief verbal spat before they resumed their fight. I have only seen him use 3 of his integrated monster traits. He still hasn't shown me the last one. Is he waiting for the right moment to use it, or is it just an auxiliary skill that he can't use in combat? Ignatius furrowed his eyebrows. When absorbing beast soul crystals, the monster traits that one could integrate were random. Because of this, beast soul warriors preferred to absorb the crystals from high-grade monsters since most of their skills were powerful. In his case, he was lucky enough that all his traits were related to fire. Should I intentionally show an opening and force him to reveal his final trump card? He hesitated. Doing this was very risky and he might even be killed. No, this is our only chance. If we don't succeed here, everyone will perish, including His Highness Alaric. Cannot let that happen. He took a deep breath, his eyes flashing with determination. In the next moment, he conjured a flame spear. This was the same skill he used to defeat Rudner Crestor. Seeing this, Ramondan frowned. Is he planning to use that as a melee weapon? Looking at his confused face, Ignatius let out a mocking smile. Did you know that this is the same flame spear that I used to kill Rudner? He was quite the troublesome opponent, but he wasn't skilled enough to block this flame spear. I guess that was the extent of his strength dash. He was about to say a few more words, but then he sensed an unusual energy swirling around Ramondan. What is this strange energy? If you were trying to piss me off, congratulations. You succeeded. Ramondan muttered coldly, his eyes burning with rage. In the next moment, he put his palm forward and summoned a black door above him which seemed to merge with the space. I didn't want to use this since it's difficult to control, but I don't plan on holding back anymore. As soon as he said this, dozens of black tentacles emerged from the door and rapidly moved towards Ignatius. Whoosh! Whoosh! Ignatius narrowed his eyes. His instincts were telling him that if these tentacles could touch him, he would be done for. Sensing the danger of the black tentacles, he stabbed out his flame spear with great speed and force. Bang! Bang! Each stab destroyed multiple black tentacles, turning them into a black gooey mist. However, he realized something horrible. New black tentacles emerged from the black door to replace those that had been destroyed. It was as if there were an infinite number of them inside the door. There are too many of them. Ignatius' face fell. He was still holding out, but his mana was about to be depleted. Once his mana ran out, he would be at the mercy of his enemy. Damn it! It seems like I have to use my last trump card now. Thinking about this, he leaped backwards to create some distance from the black tentacles. He then put his left palm forward and communicated with the fire elements in the surrounding. Ramondan's instincts screamed danger, so he instinctively leaped to the right. Just then, the ground where he last stood exploded into a fire vortex. Shit! He couldn't escape from the fire vortex, and it soon engulfed his entire body. Boom! Did I get him? Ignatius narrowed his eyes, trying to see through the thick black smoke. Everyone watched with bated breath. When the thick smoke cleared, they all saw a black ball suspended in midair. Slowly, the black ball unwrapped itself, revealing the unharmed Ramondan inside. It turned out that he used the black tentacles to cover his body just when the fire vortex was about to consume him. How is that possible? Ignatius was stunned. That was a skill that consumed a huge portion of his mana. The flames were so powerful that they could practically devour anything, but Ramondan actually survived such fearsome flames. With a victorious smile, Ramondan looked at him and said, "You look like you have used up all your mana." That was a satisfying battle, but this is where it ends, Ignatius. He put his palms forward and conjured 3 black doors where hundreds of black tentacles had suddenly sprung out from. With no more mana left to protect his body, Ignatius could only smile bitterly. Soon, the black tentacles wrapped around his body, slowly crushing him with their squeezing force. With a mocking smile, Ramondan spoke. "You were all talk after all dash." His words suddenly halted when he felt a sharp pain spreading through his body. Ramandan looked down in horror and saw a blade sticking out of his chest. Who? Who is behind me? He tried to stimulate his energy core, but he found out that he had lost control of his mana. This blade is made of mithril and adamantium. Just like mithril, adamantium is a very rare metal that could restrict one's ability to use mana. The only difference between these two metals was that adamantium was a lot rarer and it was also more durable. Even mythical knights would fall prey to weapons made from this metal. Who are you? Ramandan grabbed the blade, his face contorting with pain. There was no response. Suddenly, a thought occurred to him. Is it you? The assassin who killed my men? He roared furiously, blood trickling down from the corner of his lips. He turned his body, which caused more blood to seep out of his chest, but he ignored the pain. Behind him was a man with white pupils. He had an indifferent expression, like a puppet with no emotions. What's your name? Asked Ramandan as he stared deeply at the man. Sikas didn't say anything. In the next moment, he pulled his dagger and stabbed it into Ramandan's neck. KHSHK. Ramandan didn't expect him to be this ruthless. He wanted to say something, but he could only emit gasping sounds. How did they train this man to be this cruel? Sikas pulled out his dagger from his neck, causing blood to splatter all over his face. Ramandan staggered weakly. He quickly covered his neck to stop the bleeding, but before he could lift his hand, Sikas suddenly swung his dagger. Whoosh! With a single slash, Sikas cut off his hand, but his expression remained unchanged. Thud! Ramandan fell to his knees, gasping for breath as he stared at the remorseless man before him. To think that I, Ramandan, would fall at the hands of an assassin. Whoosh! Sikas swung his dagger once more. This time, he cut off Ramandan's head and sent it spinning into the air. The surroundings suddenly became quiet. No one expected something like this. Just half a minute ago, Ramandan was about to kill Ignatius, but then someone came out of nowhere and stole the show. When everyone went back to their senses, there was a commotion. Lord Ramandan. He killed Lord Ramandan. We must avenge Lord Ramandan. Kill him. Ramandan's troops roared like maddened beasts. With their emotions out of control, they charged towards Sikas in a disorderly fashion. Even the military officers who were supposed to organize their troops were agitated. Looking at the approaching army, Sikas took out several circular objects from his inner pocket and threw them. Some soldiers discovered his actions, but they didn't know what he had thrown out. They all thought that it was just some concealed weapons, but they soon found out that they were something much more horrifying. Boom! Boom! A series of explosions rocked the battlefield. Screams of pain and panic echoed. It was then that they realized what those circular objects were. Mana bombs. He has mana bombs. Be careful. He might have more of them. Ramandan's troops fell into confusion. No one dared to step in. All they could do was glare at the culprit. While they were hesitating to attack him, Sikas rushed to Ignatius' side and helped him stand up. We should head back to the city, my lord. I only have a few of those mana bombs. Sikas calmly whispered. Hearing this, Ignatius nodded his head, his face covered in sweat. All right. His fight with Ramandan had emptied his mana. Given his current situation, even an elite knight might be able to kill him. Sikas didn't waste any time. Excuse me, my lord. He carried the severely injured venerable and rushed back to the city. Ramandan's troops were furious when they saw this. Quick! Chase him! Don't let him enter the city! Archers! Shoot him down! Artillery units, fire at him! Blast them into pieces! Thousands upon thousands of arrows blotted the sky, shooting down upon Sikas like heavy rain. Su! 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 The enemies also aimed their trebuchets and ballistas at him. At this point, they were no longer afraid of wasting their ammunition. Bang! 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 Large boulders and ballista arrows descended from the sky, but Sikas nimbly evaded them with his quick movements. Except for some arrows that he couldn't evade, he managed to escape the bombardment and safely entered the city through the main gate. Ramandan's troops immediately charged towards the city, roaring like ferocious beasts. The death of their leader dealt a huge blow to their morale. They didn't even bother to come up with a proper plan and decided to head straight into battle. Their formation was a mess, and a few even stumbled and fell to the ground, which caused a stampede that killed a few more thousands of them. However, they didn't even stop to help those who had fallen. They just charged forward with bloodshot eyes. Just then, dozens of large boulders suddenly appeared above the sky. "Watch out! They are firing their catapults and trebuchets." The military officers warned their troops, but due to the messy formation, they couldn't react in time. The large boulders fell upon them and crushed thousands of warriors, turning them into meat paste. It was a disaster. Ramondan's troops wanted to reorganize their formation, but it was already too late. The Estanian troops fired their arrows and their artillery upon the enemy warriors. Up above the wall, Giovanni looked down at the disorderly enemy troops with a cold gaze. "You shouldn't have foolishly charged. This is what happens when you let your emotions take control of your body," he mumbled. He raised his hand and shouted to his troops, "Keep firing." The soldiers atop the walls felt a wave of pity for their enemies, but they knew that it would be them dying if they were to stop firing. For their own survival and for the sake of their families waiting for them at home, they must kill the enemies. TSK. With the ammunition we have, we can only eliminate about 100,000 of them at most. Giovanni furrowed his eyebrows. Most of their artillery ammunition had already been used up, so they could only rely on the arrows they had hastily made in the past few days. Can we defeat them? Although Ramondan's army was like a headless fly now that their leader was gone, they were still a force to be reckoned with. They had several transcendent knights who were on the same level, if not stronger than Marlin. House Silversword's troops are still taking care of the uprising. I need to hold out until they deal with the situation on their side. Thinking about this, he sent a look to the cavalrymen and infantrymen waiting behind the main gate. "Prepare to move out at my signal," he shouted. Luckily for him, there was still Kristen Evander to lead these men. His presence alone would stabilize the morale of the troops. "Yes, Your Highness." Giovanni turned his gaze back to Ramondan's troops. The disorganized troops finally realized their mistake. They knew that charging head-on would only get themselves killed, so the military officers commanded their subordinates to form a defensive line beyond the range of the Estanian artillery and archers. They sobered up real quick. This isn't good. If they use proper methods to besiege the city, our troops wouldn't be able to defend them for long, especially now that our venerable is critically injured and is not in the condition to fight. Giovanni frowned when he noticed the changes in the enemy's formation. Seeing this, he raised his fist and shouted, "Artillery units and archers, don't fire unless they are within our range." Hearing his commands, the artillery units and archers quickly halted their attacks. Suddenly, someone approached him and whispered, "Your Highness, we cannot let the enemies take a breather. With their numbers, we wouldn't be able to stop them if they move in proper formation." The one who spoke was Derek. The guy still hadn't recovered from the last battle against Rudner's troops, but he insisted on joining. Looking at Derek, who had a cast on his right arm and shoulder, Giovanni swallowed back the words he was about to say. He took a deep breath and responded with a grave look. "I know, but we don't have much ammunition left. Your Highness, we can send our cavalry and infantry to attack them while they are still organizing their troops." Giovanni frowned as he contemplated deeply. Can our soldiers really handle that many enemies? Sensing his hesitation, Derek urged him, "Your Highness, please trust our warriors. They aren't that weak to fear an army double their size. Besides, Lord Kristen." Hearing him mention this name, Giovanni raised an eyebrow. "What about him?" Derek revealed a look of fear as he replied, "I have never seen Lord Kristen this furious before. Can you not sense it? The aura he is exuding is even making his men uncomfortable." Hearing this, Giovanni turned around and looked at Kristen, who was in the frontmost position of the melee units. The old man's face looked terrifyingly cold, and he exuded a kind of aura that deterred anyone from approaching him. Lord Kristen, he must be furious because of what happened to Marco. He failed to defeat Loras, which ended up in Marco having to fight the guy himself. Although Marco won the fight, he ended up in a comatose state. Until now, he still hadn't woken up. The old man must be blaming himself for what happened to Marco. Giovanni thought to himself, will he be able to command our troops effectively when he is in this state? While he was hesitating, Derek's voice drifted into his ears. Your Highness, this might be a chance for Lord Kristen. He is already at the peak of the transcendent realm. With the right stimulus, he might even advance and become the next venerable in our nation. Giovanni rubbed his chin. Derek's words sounded convincing, but advancing to the realm of the venerables was easier said than done. After almost an entire minute, he let out a deep breath and said, all right, let's do it. I will also join them in battle, Giovanni added. Derek was stunned by his words. Your Highness, it's too dangerous for you to step into battle. There is no need for dash. Giovanni raised his hand, gesturing at him to stop talking. I have given it much thought. Relying on Lord Kristen wouldn't be enough. I need to be there to raise our troops' morale. This is the only way for us to fight against an army that is more than double our size. Derek wanted to dissuade him, but Giovanni didn't look like he would listen. In that case, I will follow you into battle, he exclaimed. Giovanni sent him a stern look. How can you fight in that state? Derek grinned. Your Highness, I only need one hand to wield a sword. As for controlling my horse, I can just tie the reins on my injured hand. Giovanni was exasperated at his stubbornness. You are getting bolder and bolder these days, Derek. You even dare to oppose my decisions now. I learned from the best. Derek chuckled. What did you say? Derek quickly ran away and shouted. I will prepare your horse, Your Highness. I will wait for you down there. Looking at him running away, Giovanni could only helplessly shake his head. Since when did I become this soft? I'm becoming more like Alaric. His behavior must have rubbed off on me, he complained. A moment later, Derek came back to inform him that his mount was ready. Your Highness, everything has been prepared. We are only waiting for your command. Giovanni stared deeply at him and nodded. Let's go. It's about time to crush those bastards. After saying this, he went down the wall and jumped onto the horse that was prepared for him. He then grabbed the reins and took a deep breath before he shouted to the gate operator. Lift the gate. Kacha. As Giovanni watched the gate being lifted, his expression gradually turned cold. Just when the gate was lifted halfway, he suddenly unsheathed his sword and raised it in midair. Warriors of Estania, outside are the disorganized troops of the fallen Ramondan. They may outnumber us, but we are more powerful than those bastards. Let go of your fears and prepare to charge with me. Today, we will defeat this so-called unbeatable army. Kacha. When the gate was fully opened, Giovanni squeezed his legs and shouted, Charge! The warriors of Estania followed him while shouting their loud battle cries to erase their fears. Meanwhile, Ramondan's troops didn't expect them to take the initiative to attack. Caught by surprise, the military officers weren't able to react immediately. When they finally gathered their senses, the Estanian troops were already halfway towards them. It was already too late to send their archers, so the military officers could only hastily send their shield-bearers and cavalrymen to slow down the approaching enemies. At this moment, the Estanian troops had gathered considerable momentum from their charge. Destroy them! Giovanni roared as he stimulated his energy core. For this battle, he couldn't afford to get careless. He immediately covered his body with mana to protect himself from unexpected attacks. A small group of skilled soldiers led by Derek also circled him, protecting him from every direction. A violent clash followed. The screams of the soldiers and the clashing of their weapons echoed across the battlefield. Ramondan's troops fiercely resisted, but the Estanian warriors were like ferocious beasts, wildly charging without fear for their lives. The most eye-catching among them was Kristen Evander. He led the Griffin Knights' order to penetrate through the enemy's defensive line. With them leading the charge, the Estanian troops managed to pierce through the enemy formation unhindered. Stop them! Don't let them break our formation! shouted one of the military officers under Ramondon. He was a transcendent knight with considerable skill and experience. If it weren't for him and a few others, Ramondon's troops would have already surrendered by now. Just then, he suddenly felt a strong presence locking in on him. Turning his head, he saw an old man riding a griffin charging at him with a cold gaze. With just a glance, he could already tell that this old man was not to be trifled with. A peak transcendent. "All of you on me," he commanded his men. He couldn't show any weakness here. Otherwise, the morale of their troops would fall even further. Seeing them charging at him, Kristen snorted and brandished his lance with tremendous force. Whoosh! With a swing, more than 10 elite knights were torn apart. Clang! "I won't let you take another step," shouted the enemy commander as he blocked his lance with his shield. Kristen narrowed his eyes. The enemy was stronger than he had thought. Although not on the level of Loras, he still had some considerable power. "You are strong, but not strong enough to stop me. I am Kristen Evander, the strongest transcendent knight of Estania. How dare you block my path?" Kristen exerted more strength on his lance, his mana overflowing like a torrent. The enemy commander was overwhelmed by his strength and formidable presence. In the next moment, his shield, a relic-level equipment, suddenly broke apart. Kristen's lance struck his body and cut him in half. Whoosh! Blood splattered all over Kristen's armor, but he ignored the stench and urged his griffin to move forward. "Griffin Knight's order. Stay close to me. Today, our names will resonate across the lands as an unrivaled force," he bellowed. Hearing his roar, the Griffin Knight's order roared. "Kill them all. Crush them." Giovanni was just right behind them. They are indeed the Imperial family's sharpest blade, he thought as he watched the Griffin Knight's order's ferocious attacks. We might be able to do it. He was starting to feel more confident about their victory, but it didn't last for long. 30 minutes into the battle, the Griffin Knight's order was forced to take a halt due to the presence of an unexpected force. It was an army consisting of 5,000 men, a heavy cavalry unit who were armed to the teeth. Each of their soldiers was significantly larger than the others. They held a shield and a broadsword, looking like the stalwart barbarian warriors. The person leading them was also no slouch. It was a dark-skinned man with short curly hair. He had a fierce look in his eyes as if he wanted to devour his enemies whole. Clang! "This man is a peak transcendent like me." Kristen frowned when he sensed his opponent's power. He thought that Loras was the most formidable transcendent knight he had fought, but the man in front of him seemed a tad stronger. "Who are you? I don't remember someone like you among the top warriors of Haroun." His opponent snorted and responded with a frosty look. "Do you think that only Estania has a secret force? Listen carefully, old man. I am Devian Redina, the commander of the unbreakable heavy cavalry." Devian Redina. I don't remember hearing this name. Is he someone personally nurtured by Ramondon? Kristen never thought that Ramondon was still hiding a man of this caliber. Not to mention the unbreakable heavy cavalry, which seemed to be the most formidable unit in his army. Fighting this man might push me into advancing to that realm. Kristen suddenly grinned. His vigorous aura fluctuated intensely, taking Devian by surprise. What's wrong with this old man? Devian, is it? Show me the strength of the so-called commander of the unbreakable heavy cavalry. Kristen's taunting voice drifted into his ears. Hearing his words, veins protruded on his face. How dare you look down on me? Furious, Devian roared as he charged at the old man. He activated his broadsword's engraved ability by pouring in his mana. You will die by my hands today, Kristen. It should be me saying that. The two fought fiercely, causing massive damage to the surroundings. Boom! Boom! Each time they clashed, violent shockwaves erupted. Kristen's lance pulsated with overwhelming force. With each swing, he left deep holes in the ground. I can feel it. I can feel my mana boiling with excitement. He could finally sense the sign that he had been waiting for. He had never felt this kind of sensation before since he stepped into the peak of transcendence. Devian, who was on the receiving end of his ferocious attacks, was starting to get annoyed. His hits are heavy. I don't think my shield would last for long. Realizing the situation, he knew that he must not be passive in this battle. With a cold snort, he pushed him back with his shield and swung his sword with lethal force. Whoosh! Seeing this, Kristen wasn't flustered. He turned and deflected the blow to forcefully change its trajectory. Shirring. Bang! Devian's broadsword heavily smashed into the ground. You are strong, but you move too slowly. Even a skilled elite knight can dodge your attacks if they are fast enough. Kristen spoke in a mocking voice. You talk too much. Devian roared and released a series of slashes, but Kristen evaded them all with ease. While they were fighting, the unbreakable heavy cavalry and the Griffin Knights Order also fought relentlessly. Individually, the warriors of the Griffin Knights Order were more powerful and skilled. On the other hand, the warriors of the unbreakable heavy cavalry were experts in defense and tactics. The battle between the two armies was brutal, and the casualties of both sides rose as the battle progressed. However, this stalemate was quickly broken when the intervention of one person. It was a man dressed in black armor. He moved like a mirage, wielding a pair of daggers with unbridled power. He was so fast that he left afterimages in his wake. Even transcendent knights could barely follow his movements. With each kill, he would disappear into the crowd and reappear to kill another. He was like a grim reaper, a shadow of death. There's another expert on your side? Devian grimaced when he saw the situation. He thought that Kristen would be the only troublesome foe he would have to face, but the presence of another warrior at their level would make things unpredictable. Sir Sekus? Kristen furrowed his eyebrows. He was planning to use Devian as a whetstone to advance his realm, but Sekus might spoil his chances. Sir Sekus, leave this man to me. I can handle him by myself, he shouted. Sekus heard his words, but he didn't respond. He continued to assassinate the warriors of the unbreakable heavy cavalry. It was as if he were sending a message to Kristen. What does he mean by this silence? Kristen couldn't understand what Sekus was thinking. How dare you look away from me? A furious roar drifted into his ears. Kristen quickly blocked the incoming sword, but the tremendous force sent him back a couple of steps. He looked down and discovered a deep gush on his arm. I was careless. He lifted his head and narrowed his eyes. Just as he was about to attack, he saw a blurry figure moving past him. Sir Sekus. He recognized the figure. Sekus ignored him and threw several hidden weapons to Devian. Su! Devian lifted his shield to protect himself from the hidden weapons, but when he lowered his shield, he found out that the enemy had already disappeared. Where is he? Where did he go? KHSK. His body suddenly turned cold and he felt a stabbing pain in his throat. Looking down, he saw a bloody dagger sticking out of his neck. How? Those were his last thoughts before his head was separated from his body. After killing him, Sekus stopped moving and stared deeply at Kristen. I understand your urgency to advance, but we are at war. Waiting for you to kill him would only result in more casualties. Kristen took a deep breath. He is right. I should be thinking of how we can minimize our losses instead of prioritizing my advancement. Sekus's words made him recall the promise he made when he became the commander of the Griffin Knights Order. I promised to protect my subordinates. But because of me, He was ashamed of himself. He was about to respond to Sekus, but the guy was nowhere to be found. He smiled faintly and mumbled, I will express my gratitude later. I must thank him for making me remember the promise I made back then. With Sekus' help, the Griffin Knights Order managed to push back the unbreakable heavy cavalry and force them into retreat. The Estanian troops also dealt a huge blow to Ramondan's army and drove them away from Midgard after a few hours of battle. We won. Giovanni took off his helmet as he watched the retreating enemy soldiers. Derek, who was next to him, said with a chuckle, You did great, Your Highness. We won because you were here to inspire our troops. Giovanni shook his head. It wasn't because of me. You saw it too. It was because of him. When he said this, he looked at the lone figure in the middle of countless corpses. He was dressed in black armor that was drenched in blood. The daggers he was holding were still dripping wet, looking incredibly terrifying. Derek followed his gaze and nodded without saying a word. Sekus wasn't the flashiest fighter, but he killed the most dangerous foes on the enemy's side. He made things easier for them by killing the enemy's commanders. Once things are over, House Silversword will be recognized as the strongest household in all of Estania, Giovanni added, his voice filled with certainty. That's true. For a countryside aristocrat, they have more transcendent knights than those big shots in the capital. Derek agreed. Enough about that. We still have things to deal with. Besides, the battle isn't over yet. Later that day, an urgent meeting was held and all of the Estanian military officers in Midgard were invited. The atmosphere was solemn despite their victory. This was because of the losses they incurred from the battle. We lost 40,000 warriors. Alaric announced the number of deaths and it made everyone's face turn dark. It's my fault, Your Highness. If I hadn't been so selfish, we wouldn't have lost. Kristen spoke with remorse, but he was cut off by Alaric. I am not looking for someone to blame here. Just promise me that we won't be making the same mistake again. Alaric sent him a cold look. The Griffin Knights' order lost half of their men. If Sekus hadn't been there, they would have lost more people. I understand. I will be more careful. Kristen lowered his head. Now let us discuss our next steps. Ramondan's army still has over 300,000 soldiers. They may have lost several of their commanders, but they are still a huge threat to us. We must make thorough preparations before their next attack. Alaric stated the main agenda of the meeting. They were only lucky enough to win because Sekus succeeded in killing Ramondan. Otherwise, things would have gone differently. There was a long discussion and it took them over 2 hours to come up with a proper solution for the situation. After the meeting concluded, the military officers left the meeting location with grim faces. Will this be enough? Giovanni asked. They only had a little more than 100,000 warriors left, including those who were still recovering. Among them, only half could fight and the rest were not even in the condition to lift their weapons. Their venerable, Ignatius, was also not in the condition to help them since he had taken some serious damage from his battle with Ramondan. Alaric frowned as he leaned on his seat. To tell you the truth, I am not sure. The residents of Midgard were dissatisfied with them and they might cause them trouble soon. They also had to be wary of Ramondan's troops who could attack them at any moment. Knock! 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 Suddenly, a series of knocks on the door interrupted their conversation. Giovanni sent Alaric a look before he said, You may come inside. Creak. Derek stepped in, his face lighting up with excitement. Your Highnesses, I have good news. We received word from His Highness, Prince Leonard. Hearing this, Alaric and Giovanni sat up straight. Bring it here. Giovanni beckoned to him impatiently. Derek didn't make him wait and handed him the letter while making his report. According to His Highness, they have already retaken Atarkan. He also said that there were survivors from Mount Tyrad who came to Halona. Alaric was surprised to hear this. He thought that everyone in Mount Tyrad had perished. That's good to hear. Hold on. It says here reinforcements are coming and the person leading them is Lord Lucas. Giovanni looked at Derek in disbelief. Only a few days had passed since Atarkan had been recaptured by Ramondan's troops, but it had already been conquered by Leonard again. He couldn't believe it. The letter has His Highness's seal, so it's definitely true. Derek smiled. Great! We can defeat Ramondan's troops now. Giovanni laughed heartily. The gloominess from earlier vanished and was replaced with joy. Alaric was also relieved. Leonard is truly amazing. 2 days later, My lord, we spotted the enemy's camp. Lucas furrowed his eyebrows. Where is it? The scout pointed in a certain direction and said, About 2 miles from that direction, there is a hill. The enemy's camp is beneath that hill. 2 miles? It would take us half a day to get there at our current pace. Lucas pondered for a moment. He had already received a report on the situation in Midgard, so he knew that things were dire on their side. I must make a move now before they attack Midgard. Thinking about this, Lucas shouted to his troops. Warriors of Estania, the enemies have been located. Our allies in Midgard are still recovering from the recent battle, so we must attack the enemies before it's too late. We are running now. Vanguard troops, clear the path. Make sure that our army will move unhindered. He issued a series of commands. Meanwhile, beneath a hill several miles from Midgard, a simple camp was built by the surviving soldiers of Ramondan's troops. The whole mood around the camp was dreadfully tense. Everyone was shaking with anxiety due to the deaths of their commanders. At this moment, the 5 surviving Transcendent Knights gathered to discuss their next course of action. What should we do now? Lord Ramondan has fallen and many of our skilled warriors have died. One of them spoke with a stern look. We should retreat further and head south. Estania had already taken control of 3 key cities. With the current state of our troops, we no longer have enough strength to recapture the cities they had conquered. You want to give up just like that? Haven't you seen what they did to Lord Ramondan? Those bastards sent an assassin to kill him in the middle of a duel. They deserve to die. The 5 of them argued back and forth, which almost escalated into a fistfight. Enough, all of you. There are only 5 of us left, and you are still arguing here like whining kids, spoke a white-haired old warrior wearing an eye patch. He had the most seniority among them, so they all quieted down the moment he spoke. Sir, what do you think we should do then? Everyone stared at the old warrior, hoping to hear some kind of solution from him. With a helpless sigh, he shook his head. I suggest that we surrender. What? There are only 5 of us left while the enemies still have many Transcendent Knights. Moreover, the morale of our troops is low. Fighting in this situation would only get all of us killed, the old warrior explained. Suddenly, they heard footsteps approaching them. Commanders! Enemies are coming. It's them. The Estanian troops are coming. The old warrior wearing an eye patch rose to his feet, his face looking grim. I will bring my troops to them and surrender. I don't think they will kill war prisoners. He spoke in a heavy tone. Hearing this, the 4 Transcendent Knights didn't know how to react. Sir, you've seen what they did to Atarkan. Are you really going to surrender to those people? I understand your frustrations. I really do. I have friends and relatives among the warriors killed in Atarkan, so I'm also furious. However, the old warrior scanned their faces one by one before he continued. Behind us are 300,000 men. I don't want to see any more of them getting killed. The 4 commanders fell silent upon hearing this. We have no time to discuss this. The old warrior didn't wait for their response and left with haste. The enemies are before us. Unsheathe your weapons. Lucas roared as he urged his horse to move faster. Hearing his words, the Estanian troops issued their battle cries. For Estania! For Estania! At this moment, Lucas noticed movement in the enemy camp, but something was unusual. Why are they waving a white flag? Is this a trap? It was a signal of surrender, but Lucas found it suspicious since only a portion of the enemy troops had stepped out, while a huge bulk remained at the camp to fortify their defenses. My lord, it appears that the enemy troops are divided, but this could be a trap to lure us in intentionally. An aged voice drifted into his ears. Lucas turned his head. The one who spoke was Sherwin, one of the Transcendent Knights nurtured by his wife, Jade Christine Estania. Sherwin was a highly skilled warrior with rich experience and knowledge. What do you think we should do, Sir Sherwin? Lucas asked while gesturing to his troops to slow down. Author's note: Sherwin is a character who works under Jade Christine. See Chapter 311 for reference. Sherwin narrowed his eyes. If you permit it, I would like to speak with those people. Lucas frowned and shook his head. No, it's too dangerous. It might be a trap they had deliberately set up to make us lower our guard. My lord, we don't have as many men as they. Even if we have you on our side, it will still be a tough battle. Thousands of our men will definitely perish. Sherwin shared his insights. But we can minimize our losses if we try to negotiate with them. Please leave it to me. Lucas pondered deeply before giving his approval. All right, but I will come with you. Sherwin hesitated, but he eventually agreed with the Venerable's decision. If Lucas were there, they would be able to escape if something went wrong. I will follow your commands, my lord. Good. Lucas nodded. He then raised his fist in midair, signaling his troops to stop charging. Although surprised, the trained Estanian warriors followed the instructions. Lucas beckoned to another commander, a man named Rendon who was also the current 10th ranked in the Estanian Dragon leaderboard. Author's note: in case you don't remember Rendon, see chapter 312. Rendon, we will try to negotiate with those people. While I'm gone, you will take command of the troops. Lucas instructed. Rendon furrowed his eyebrows. My lord, isn't it too risky to negotiate with them in this situation? It is, but if we can minimize our losses, I'm willing to take the risk. Lucas responded with a stern look. Rendon let out a deep breath before he nodded. I understand. You can leave everything to me, my lord. However, if we see any sign of hostility from them, I will lead our troops to destroy them all. Lucas nodded solemnly. My lord, 2 cavalrymen are heading this way. It must be their negotiators. Sherwin's voice drifted into his ears. Hearing this, Lucas sent him a look and said, Let's go. The atmosphere was heavy and tense. It looked as if a fight could break out at any moment. Sherwin took the lead, while Lucas followed half a meter behind him. The two controlled their horses to walk slowly, as if hinting to the enemies that they were willing to negotiate. Soon, both parties stood before each other, just separated by several meters. I am Sherwin, a warrior of House Silversword and commander of the army behind us. Sherwin noticed the opposing side's silence, so he introduced himself. He then pointed to Lucas and said, This is Venerable Lucas Silversword, the Shield of the North, and the strongest man of the northern region of Estania. When they heard this introduction, the 2 men on the opposing side visibly shivered. Venerable, this was an expert on the same level as their lord, Ramondan Hildebrand. Please pardon our ignorance, Lord Venerable. An old warrior wearing an eye patch stepped forward and lowered his head. He tried to mask it, but fear was evident in his face. Lucas indifferently waved his hand and spoke in a cold voice. You can speak with Sherwin here, but if I sense any falsehoods in your words, then you'd better be ready for the consequences. Yes, Lord Venerable. The old warrior with an eye patch nervously wiped off his sweat. He then turned his head to Sherwin and cupped his fist. I am Brenwyn, a commander under Venerable Ramondan Hildebrand. Under me are close to 100,000 soldiers, which makes a third of our troops. We are willing to surrender if you can guarantee the safety of my men. He spoke with sincerity. He was still harboring other thoughts earlier, but he quickly changed his mind when he discovered that the other side had a venerable leading them. Sir Brenwyn, we can guarantee your men's safety, but they must surrender their weapons and horses to us. Otherwise, our soldiers wouldn't feel safe and it might lead to conflict between our soldiers. Sherwin offered them a way out. Brenwyn already expected them to demand this, so he nodded with a grave look. I hope you will keep your word, Sir Sherwin. You can rest assured. I'm just curious. What about those people in the camp? Are they intending to oppose us until the end? When Sherwin mentioned this, the surrounding temperature drastically dropped. Brenwyn and his deputy felt a chill. If they made a mistake here, they knew that the negotiations would fail. Brenwyn took a deep breath before he responded. Sir, can you give me some time to discuss with my comrades? I'm sure they are just hesitant to surrender, but if I dash, we can give you an hour, but you must have an answer by then. Otherwise, our army will charge with full force and destroy everything in your camp, including your people. Sherwin didn't mince his words. Brenwyn's face fell. I understand. I will persuade them to surrender. After bowing to Lucas, he returned to their camp with haste. While watching them leave, Lucas asked, What do you think? Will they surrender? Sherwin shook his head. It's unclear, my lord. If they are loyal to Ramondan, some of them might choose to fight until the end, even if it ends with them dying. I apologize for deciding without your permission. Lucas understood what he meant, but he wasn't offended by it. You don't have to apologize. I would have made the same choice. Let's go back first and wait for their decision. Yes, my lord. After Brenwyn returned to the camp, he immediately summoned the 4 transcendent knights, hoping to persuade them into surrendering. However, the 4 transcendent knights immediately surrounded him with unkind faces. What is the meaning of this? Brenwyn flew into rage. Sir Brenwyn, you are a traitor. How dare you lower your head to those Estanian bastards? Have you no shame? Can you still face Lord Ramondin in the afterlife? One of the 4 roared furiously. Brenwyn frowned, his face darkening. Traitor? I only want my men to live. Is that considered betrayal? He thought that he could still persuade his comrades, but it seemed impossible now. Enough with your excuses. We don't want to hear the words of a traitor. The 4 transcendents unsheathed their weapons. Shirring. Seeing this, Brenwyn stared deeply at him, his aura rising by the second. Move out of my way if you don't want to lose your heads. Do you think you alone can stop the 4 of us? Don't think too highly of yourself, old man. You are way past your prime. Hearing this, it was as if something had snapped inside Brenwyn. He unsheathed his sword and brandished it with terrifying force. Whoosh! I will let you young ones know why I am the 4th in command under Lord Ramondin. A fearsome battle broke out between the Ramondin's troops. My lord, it seems like the negotiations on their side have broken down. Should we intervene? Sherwin asked when he noticed the situation in the enemy camp. Lucas suddenly smiled while shaking his head. No, we will wait for the battle to conclude. We can decide what to do when the winner is revealed. I understand. I will inform the troops about your decision. Sherwin nodded and left to deliver the information to the military officers. Meanwhile, Lucas kept his eyes on the enemy camp. This is for the best. Whichever side wins, their troops wouldn't be in the condition to fight us. The Estanian troops coldly watched the battle without any intention of interfering. The battle became more intense as time passed by. Brenwyn's side was outnumbered, so they were being pushed back since the battle began. After an hour, the corpses from both sides piled up, but there was still no sign of them stopping. Finally, after more than 2 hours of brutal battle, one side emerged victorious. Surprisingly, Brenwyn's army came out as the victor despite being severely outnumbered. Initially, he had about 100,000 warriors, but 90,000 of them perished. Those who survived were all injured and some were even half dead. It was a Pyrrhic victory. At this moment, Brenwyn stood blankly as he watched the corpses around him. Why did it have to come to this? Tears fell from his eyes as emotions welled up in his heart. He only wanted to survive and to ensure his subordinates' safety, but it led to a misunderstanding that caused this tragedy. He fell to his knees and lifted his head, screaming with remorse. Why? Ah! The surviving soldiers stared at their commander with complicated gazes. Suddenly, they noticed the Estanian troops marching towards them, their intentions unknown. Sir, the Estanian troops are heading this way. His subordinates' concerned voices drifted into Brenwyn's ears, but he ignored their words and took out a dagger. No! Sir Brenwyn, don't! Brenwyn lifted the dagger and plunged it into his chest, but before it could pierce his body, someone suddenly grabbed his arm, stopping it just a few centimeters away. Sir Brenwyn, you must not leave these men behind. Hearing the familiar voice, Brenwyn lifted his head and saw the old warrior he had negotiated with. Sir Sherwin. Sherwin sighed and felt pity for him. The guilt must have been too much to bear that he thought of taking his own life. You have made this decision, so you must see it through to the end, no matter how difficult it is to bear. Sherwin pulled him up and patted the man's shoulder. I guarantee that your men will be taken care of. We will treat the wounded and feed them well, and I promise that no one will mistreat them. Brenwyn lowered his head without saying a word. Sherwin took his dagger and his sword. As per our agreement, we will be taking your weapons. Brenwyn didn't resist and let him take his weapons. After taking his weapons, Sherwin sent a hand signal to the Estanian warriors. Their weapons and horses were confiscated, including those owned by the dead warriors. All of Brenwyn's troops were injured, so they didn't dare to resist. They reluctantly surrendered their possessions and allowed the Estanian troops to cuff them regardless of how humiliating it was. Alaric was looking at the reports submitted by his subordinates inside his mansion in Midgard when a sudden notification popped up in front of him. Under. Mission complete. Rewards: 10,000 battle points, 2,000 EXP, 300 stat points, 3 Ringed Beast Soul Warrior card X1, Random Trait Upgrade card X2, SSS-Rank Trait card X1. Under. Alaric's Silver Sword, Transcendent Knight, EXP. 1,233, 3233/5000. Potential S. Traits: Swordsmanship, SSS. Ruthless Slaughterer, SS. Supreme Regeneration, S. Horseback Riding, A. Close Combat, A. Sixth Sense, B. Appraisals, B. Hunting, C. Tracking, C. Monster Affinity, C. Mana Gathering, C. Archery, D. Strength: 423. Stamina: 415. Agility: 415. Vitality: 365. Endurance: 365. Mana: 400. Battle points: 11,330. 21330. Stat points: 0/300. Requirements for the next advancement: 5,000 EXP, 500 in all attributes, and 25,000 battle points. Seeing this, he was ecstatic. It seems like Dad has already dealt with Ramondan's remnant forces. While he was thinking about this, another notification popped up. Do you want to use your SS-Rank trait card? Yes. No. I wonder what trait I will get this time. His eyes were filled with anticipation when he clicked. Yes. You have awakened the SS-Rank Shield Mastery trait. A Shield Mastery trait? That's not too bad. His traits were mostly focused on the offensive side, so having a defense-type trait was a good addition to his arsenal. Do you want to use your random trait upgrade card X2? Yes. No. Alaric unhesitatingly clicked. Yes. Congratulations. Your trait Sixth Sense, B, has been upgraded to Sixth Sense, A. Congratulations. Your trait Swordsmanship, SSS, has been upgraded to Swordsmanship, L. With a look of disbelief, Alaric rose to his feet when he saw what had been upgraded. Holy shit. I thought SSS rank was the limit. What does an L rank mean? Suddenly, he felt a stabbing pain in his head that made him grimace. Foreign memories flooded his mind, bombarding him with complex information. His face was filled with sweat, but a broad grin hung on his lips. It still makes me uncomfortable, but it is the best feeling in the world. While steadying himself, he glanced at the swords leaning against the wall. He felt the urge to try out his upgraded swordsmanship, but he knew that it wasn't the best time. Based on the memories he received, his L-rank swordsmanship wasn't just an improvement in his sword skills. As long as he wielded his sword, he could freely manipulate the ice element without consuming a lot of mana. Doesn't this make me equivalent to a beast soul warrior with ice manipulation integrated monster trait? He was excited just thinking about it. Using the ice element was a heavy burden to his energy core since it consumed huge amounts of mana, but things were different now. Do you want to use your 3-ringed beast soul warrior card? Yes. No. Alaric contemplated for a moment before making his decision. If an unfamiliar person appeared at this moment, the others might mistake them for an enemy. No, I shouldn't be hesitating now. The recent battles caused them significant losses, so they were in dire need of capable men. Who is outside? He called out in a stern voice. Creak. Galliner stepped in and bowed his head. Your Highness, there is only me and Seekus here. Hearing this, Alaric nodded and said, Don't let anyone enter without my permission. I will be summoning someone. Galliner's eyes flashed upon hearing this. Yes, Your Highness. Alaric waved his hand. All right, you may leave. Galliner bowed and left the room. After the door closed, Alaric clicked, Yes. He already knew what was about to happen, so he tried to keep his eyes open to see if he could catch a glimpse of the summoning process. In the next moment, a blinding ray of light flashed before him, almost forcing him to shut his eyes. In that instant, he saw arcane writings floating in the form of a human. It was a form of writing that he had never seen before, but for some unusual reason, he found it familiar. When the light vanished, a brown-skinned, middle-aged woman appeared. She looked ordinary, and there wasn't anything remarkable about her facial features. However, her body figure was very well defined for someone her age. The woman lowered her head, causing her long, curly brown hair to fall from her shoulders. "Greetings, my lord." Alaric nodded. "From now on, your name will be Scylla." Normally, he would need a long time to come up with the name, but this time it just occurred to him naturally. "Thank you for bestowing your servant with a name, my lord." Scylla's voice sounded stern and cold, like that of a strict teacher from a renowned academy. He habitually used his appraisal on her. "Scylla, 3-ringed Beast Soul Master XP, 4599/5000. Potential as Integrated Monster Traits. Controller of the Dead, SSS. Corrosion, SS. Expanded Energy Core, SS. Traits: Poison Mastery, SS. Discipline, S. Intimidation, S. Swordsmanship, A. Archery, A. Sixth Sense, A. Calligraphy, A. Painting, A, Strength, 277. Stamina, 288. Agility, 299. Vitality, 264. Endurance, 275. Mana, 999. "Scylla, can you show me what you can do?" Alaric instructed when he saw her integrated monster traits. "As you command." Scylla took 3 steps back. She then chanted some kind of demonic passage which caused a drastic reaction in her surroundings. The temperature dropped all of a sudden. Dark and purple patterns floated around her, giving her an eerie and gloomy aura. A few seconds later, the dark and purple patterns clustered together and formed a hideous-looking 3-meter door that gave off a strong scent of death. Alaric could even see a black aura seeping out from the door, looking incredibly terrifying. He felt goosebumps as he watched Scylla conjure this mysterious power. Alaric thought that it was the end of it, but the hideous-looking door abruptly opened, and from there emerged a decaying corpse wearing tattered armor. It was also riding on top of a dead horse. "What the hell is that?" He was stunned. "Do you want to use appraisal on the selected target?" "Yes." "No." "Huh?" His appraisal could only detect living beings, so he was dumbfounded when he realized that he could use the trait on the monster. "Is that a living creature?" Out of curiosity, he clicked yes. Death Knight, Transcendent Knight EXP. Not applicable. Potential, not applicable. Strength, 400. Stamina, 400. Agility, 400. Vitality, 400. Endurance, 400. Mana, 0. Bloody hell. The strong. He was astounded by the monster's attributes. It had the power to contend with the warriors in the top 3 of the Estanian Dragon leaderboard. While he was reeling in shock, Scylla's voice drifted into his ears. "I can summon this guy, but keeping him consumes a lot of my mana, so I can only control him for 5 hours at most." Alaric raised an eyebrow and asked, "What happens after those 5 hours?" Scylla made a hand gesture and replied, "This happens." The Death Knight suddenly corroded and slowly turned into a pile of pungent mud. Looking at the dark mud beneath his feet, Alaric furrowed his eyebrows. It was a being summoned from the dead. "I only gave it temporary life with my mana." Scylla explained how her skill worked. "I see. So she gives them temporary life. No wonder my appraisal can detect them. That's an amazing skill you have. I'm just curious." Alaric stared deeply at her and asked, "Can you only summon 1 Death Knight?" Hearing this, Scylla let out a smile as she replied, "I can summon 3 Death Knights at maximum, but I can only keep them for 2 hours. I can also summon lower-ranking Death Warriors for a much longer time." Alaric was intrigued by her ability. You can summon other kinds of monsters? He wondered how she got this integrated monster trait. Scylla nodded her head. Yes, my lord, but I can only summon the beings from the underworld. Alaric asked her a few more questions related to her skill, to which she answered without hiding any details. If used appropriately, we can make use of her ability to minimize our casualties. Alaric got some ideas after hearing her explain the nature of her integrated monster trait. According to her, she could control 20 skeleton warriors, which were as strong as elite knights, for over 5 hours. She could also summon 100 undead, which were equivalent to knights. The only problem is that we might be branded as demonic believers if someone saw the monsters she summons. Alaric clicked his tongue, feeling slightly annoyed. I need to come up with a way to hide the identities of her summons. Otherwise, it might cause me some trouble in the future. Demonic believers were seen as a threat by all individuals from other religions. If House Silversword was associated with them, the entire household would face a major backlash. Alaric couldn't let that happen. With a serious face, he looked at Scylla and said, "You will stay with me for the time being. I will teach what you need to know. Given the unusual nature of your abilities, you must not carelessly reveal them to anyone without my permission. Do you understand?" "Yes, my lord." Alaric patiently explained what she should not reveal in public. He repeated things twice to make sure that she wouldn't forget them. "You will have to refer to me as Your Highness." He also told her all that she needed to know about his identity. "I understand, Your Highness." Scylla quickly grasped things, and it looked like she had already understood the situation. "Good." Alaric was pleased with her response. "I will bring some people here and have them introduce you to those on our side. That way, no one would mistake you for an enemy." "I will follow your arrangements." Scylla nodded without protest. "Galliner!" Alaric called out. Creak. Galliner stepped in, his gaze momentarily stopping on Scylla before he turned his head to Alaric. "I am here, Your Highness. Bring some of our guys here. I want them to introduce Scylla to our people." Alaric instructed. "As you command." Galliner acknowledged his command with a fist-palm salute. He then stepped out of the room to look for people to do the job. A moment later, Galliner returned with 3 warriors, which included Aldrin. "You 3 will introduce Dame Scylla to our people. Don't let anyone offend her. Do you understand?" Galliner spoke sternly to the 3. Aldrin and the other 2 looked at the unfamiliar woman before nodding their heads. "Yes, Sir Galliner." Not long later, Galliner and the trio took Scylla and left the room, leaving Alaric alone once more. "Now that they are gone, I should distribute my stat points." He had 300 unallocated stat points. Normally, he would keep them and only distribute them if necessary. However, he was already close to maxing out some of his attributes, so he decided to distribute them now. "Let's see. What should I max out first?" He rubbed his chin thoughtfully as he observed his stats. After some consideration, he decided to max out his strength, agility, and stamina. These 3 were the most important attributes for warriors. Improving all 3 would bring about a huge boost to his overall combat power. Thinking about this, he quickly distributed his stat points between the 3 attributes. Strength, 423, 500. Stamina, 415, 500. Agility, 415, 500. The 300 stat points he received from completing the mission immediately dropped to 53. I don't really need to upgrade my mana since I can just increase it through mana gathering. I'll just divide the remaining stat points and allocate them to my endurance and vitality. Endurance, 365, 392. Vitality, 365, 391. Stat points, 53, 0. Looking at the huge improvements in his stats, Alaric grinned. "I wonder if I can beat Galliner or Sekus now. I will spar with them once we return to Estania." News about the 3 cities being conquered spread across all of Harun, causing massive unrest among the populace. What made everyone more uneasy was the deaths of Rudner and Ramondan. They had already lost 2 venerables during the battle in Ackland Pass, and the loss of 2 more peak experts greatly weakened their nation's military presence. There were mixed reactions from the various aristocratic and martial houses. Many of them wanted to send their troops to the 3 cities to retake them, but there were also some who chose to stay silent. Everyone waited for the imperial family of Harun to make a move, but for some reason, they were unusually unresponsive. A week after the defeat of Ramandan's troops in the imperial castle of Harun, the emperor of Harun, Arsientus van Harun, sat on his throne with a gloomy face. He was a middle-aged man with a pair of purple eyes that seemed to spark with mysterious energy. Wearing his imperial dragon robes, he looked incredibly intimidating and filled with unquestionable authority. Beneath the throne was the remaining venerable of Harun, who is also his most trusted advisor, Donovan Cleves now. He was a middle-aged man dressed in gaudy golden armor with a deep blue cape. At this moment, Donovan lowered his head and spoke to the emperor in a solemn voice. "Your Majesty, the Emperor of Estania is demanding that we cede the 3 cities they had conquered." Arsientus van Harun frowned, his face darkening. "That greedy old bastard! How dare he covet the great lands of Harun?" He slammed his fist into the armrest, smashing it into smithereens. Bang! He was absolutely furious. Seeing his reaction, Donovan sighed and said, "Your Majesty, I understand your rage. I am furious too, but if we reject his demands, he might send more forces to attack other cities and conquer them." He paused for a moment before he continued in a grim voice. "With 4 of our venerables gone, going to war with them would only lead to irreversible damage to our military power. They might even take the chance to seize control of our nation." He was implicitly telling the emperor that they stood no chance against Estania. Arsientus was livid, but he quickly controlled his anger. He then asked, his voice shaking with suppressed rage, "Is he only demanding those 3 cities?" Donovan shook his head and responded with a stern look. "I'm afraid not, Your Majesty. Geographically speaking, if they take control of those 3 cities, it would mean giving up on 3 more cities which are closely connected to those 3. The emperor frowned in confusion. Seeing this, Donovan quickly explained. "Atarkan, Midgard, Halona, Noyam, and Zerkith are closely linked to each other. Once they station their troops to control the routes of these 5 cities, Nakalub, which is located in the middle, would be isolated." Arsientus almost flew into rage when he heard this. "You mean that bastard is not just aiming for 3 cities, but 6? "That's right." Donovan nodded with a grave look. "He smartly demanded that we cede those 3 cities, but his goal is definitely to conquer all 6 neighboring cities." Taking a deep breath, Arsientus rubbed his temples to ease his nerves. "Is there any way for us to stop them from getting those cities?"